Hi, Alyssa. Welcome to the 10x Marketer podcast. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself and then let's get into the questions. We have a list.
Sounds great. It's great to be here. My name's Alyssa Corso. I'm an SEO consultant working with healthcare startups, mostly telehealth companies, and I help them take their SEO growth from 0 to 1 and really establish a presence on Google search.
Awesome, Alyssa. And you have been very humble. I think you are one of the experts I follow. So, definitely a humble introduction here. But so great to have you on the 10x Marketer podcast. And I'll start with a simple question. What triggered the addition of the word experience in the EEAT framework, according to you? And how has that changed the SEO as a scenario overall? What is the impact of that one change?
Yeah, absolutely. So adding experience to the EEAT framework really makes it so that when you're developing YMYL or your money or your life content, it really requires there to be some sort of level of experience in writing about the topic. So when you have a certain topic in healthcare specifically, maybe it's about a health condition or medication, it's quite easy to, write an article, especially kind of using AI or even utilizing writers in the space to create the content. But when you have the experience piece, it's really looking for that firsthand experience. Did a patient go through it, or did the writer go through it? Or maybe you have a medical reviewer going through the content and they have experience either treating the condition, prescribing a medication, or just kind of handling a situation overall. So the way that this really kind of changes the game a little bit in YMYL specifically is that it's harder now to kind of just produce a piece of content, put it on the internet and start ranking right away. You really have to have that experience piece to show readers that and the Google search algorithm that you are a reputable and reliable source for the topic.
Understood. So when we talk about experience, and this is slightly confusing to me also, and maybe a lot of audiences are also confused. So there are two levels of experience in any case, especially in the healthcare. So one, the experience I have as a patient. So maybe dealing with a certain disease as a patient is one level of experience that I have. Then another experience that you have is as a practitioner. So practitioner experience one is how is it measured? So if I have, let's say, 10 years of experience versus 2 years of experience, is there any difference in Google's eyes, or is there any parameter to measure that? And how do you compare that experience with the experience of a person who has been through it? So let's say I have suffered an injury or maybe a medical condition. I have been through that condition and I'm writing an article to describe my conditions, the experience that I had to go through while dealing with it. Will that also count as an experience as a general user versus the experience of a practitioner? So, how do you measure that? How do you account that? And at what level you consider that, yes, this is the expert? So, if you have 10-year experience, maybe you are the expert. If you just have 1 year, 2 year experience, you will start becoming an expert. So, is there any thin line? Is there any guideline for that?
Yes, that's a great question. So the way that I think about it is through search intent. So and we see this a lot in Reddit search results, right? Like when you are searching for an individual experience, when the user is looking for that like firsthand experience, then that's when a direct like experience that someone has gone through could be more relevant in a piece of content than per se a medical professional. That's not to say that that's like we should like override that totally, like we don't need medical professionals reviewing content, but it's just in terms of value and how we might see that we kind of weigh the two. So for example, like we see a lot of search results for healthcare where the person is really looking for that direct experience that someone has gone through it before, and that's when you see Reddit after the search result, right? It's um like when someone's looking for side effects of a medication is a good example. You might see Reddit after that, and that's kind of an indication that someone's looking for that forum or like that discussion over it. Whereas, um, if someone is looking more for an educational piece, they're looking to be educated and really read about the research, that's when we might lean more so on like a medical professional or a clinician or someone who's just very familiar with the field. Like I said, it's not that we prefer one or the other. It's just that we are taking account for what the reader is looking for. And you can have both. And I actually think that's the ideal scenario. So, like I said, we're really trying to kind of pair the two so that someone can, trust a patient experience and trust that experience that they've gone through while having some research to back it up. So that's ideally how when us as SEOs like go about content, that's a really good way to look at it. Another way is that a medical professional or clinician can share their experience treating a condition or seeing like what kind of side effects might come about. At the end of the day, the user or reader is should definitely consult with their medical team and they're really looking just for insight on top of that usually. So we want to keep that in mind as well. So when you're thinking of that experience piece, you're really getting inside the shoes of the reader and trying to understand like what kind of experience is most valuable to them right now, but also you need to pair it with that accuracy and the other EAT that goes along with it. So expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. So we of course don't want to just focus on experience and forget about the rest of the acronym. That's very important.
Yeah, so the other part of the same question was, how does Google measure the experience? Is there any measurement at all?
So to my knowledge, there's no real like measurement to say that this person is the most experienced in the field. But keeping in mind as a content publisher or SEO or just like a company that's producing content in general, you want to make sure that your the person that's providing the experience does have relevant and trustworthy experience and that they would have the knowledge to be able to contribute in that regard. So that's why when you say like if you're utilizing like someone just someone who's just experienced firsthand the information, like you really do have to trust that they did go through that. And like that's why people do trust Reddit, because they're going to the forum, writing their experience and giving that advice. So and it seems that like if they have all of the knowledge kind of like around this because they went through it, that it seems to almost be like enough when it comes to ranking on Google and Reddit forums. But when you're talking about medical professionals and clinicians or even writers, I like to look for and work with writers who have written about the topic before, have worked with publications where they do extensive research in the field. And then when it comes to reviewers, like clinicians and medical reviewers, I do like to work with those who have direct experience treating patients with certain medications and conditions. I don't necessarily think they have to have like 10 plus years of experience, but that working background of being in it and knowing you know what it's like day to day, not just from the content perspective, but from their background, their working background. So these are the things that I generally look for. And also, every company is different. You have to consider your budget. You have to consider maybe the resources that they have on hand. For example, healthcare companies often work with doctors and therapists and dietitians and like they might have just resources that they're able to tap into, which then of course help their the other parts of the EEAT as well. So there are a lot of things to consider. To my knowledge, there's no strict roadmap or guidance here, but there are so many different ways that companies can leverage this for their SEO content.
Understood. So now the second part of this question is, they may be Google in a way is considering authority, and that comes from your certifications, your degrees, how you connect to them with your article. That is also important from that point. It's not just the experience. Now you have been saying that this EEAT, your experience, expertise, authority, and trust, is more like a guideline. It's not a strict ranking factor. That is understood by everyone. But if you have to take EEAT as a guideline and then you want to rank for certain keywords, then what kind of action items that you can prepare to make sure that you are exactly following those guidelines and they are working in your favor? rather than against you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would start with some sort of medical or clinical review process. That's always kind of my first line of defense when it comes to EEAT. And it also helps. And even if you take, by the way, EEAT out of the equation and just think from a user perspective, you want, this is serious information, right? That you're sharing with, it can impact someone's life. So you want to almost just like think to yourself, how can I make this content as trustworthy as possible so that if the user takes action with something that is written here, it will be in their best interest. So that's what I kind of always think about. So medical review or clinical review helps that as a first step after the article is written. They are using their medical background to make sure that the information is accurate and sound. Other things that you can do to improve your EEAT is to add sources to scientific journals and studies, research, highly um, trustworthy sources in general to your content whenever you're making a medical claim. I think that's like comes right up next against medical review because it shows that your information is also coming from a source that's already been established and quite honestly Google likely already trusts. So when you think of things like um JAMA articles or research studies or NCBI, PubMed, .gov or .edu resources as long as they are relevant to your article. So kind of things like that, sources, medical review, and also something that is might sound a bit vague, but I've been noticing does make a pretty big difference is kind of the look and feel of your website, making sure that when a user comes to your website, it's a good experience and meaning they can really navigate throughout your pages and find things that they're looking for. It's kind of clean and not like, I think we could all kind of picture a website that's like clunky and doesn't make sense to the user and it's just like almost just messy. But I like to think of those things as you know, that's what it's almost like when someone walks into like a doctor's office or walks into a building, you have like a feel, right? And that matters to a person and also matters to how they might take you like seriously, right? Or like trust you. Um so these things like I like to think of for the website too. Make sure it's welcoming. It feels like the person can trust your information. And then you can also leverage things like social proof. If you have a healthcare, SaaS and you it's HIPAA compliant, you should maybe put a badge there that it's HIPAA compliant. Um, if you've been mentioned in different publications or even books and kind of things like that that help to show that this information can be trusted are all great things. And like I said, putting yourself back into the user and like how could you show that this is relevant and trustworthy information?
Understood. So, uh, let's start with the YMYL because everyone is talking about it, but not many people understand what it really means. Maybe you can start with the definition of what YMYL really means in terms of the actual healthcare content or travel content or any other content. Maybe financial, also financial, legal, health. These are some of the areas where Google is very strict. Second is, let's say, start from the COVID times when we started seeing a lot of articles giving COVID related advices. Most of the ones were written by general public and they were started ranking. What kind of shift have you seen happening in the YMYL standards or guidelines or the strictness in judging the content since 2019, since the COVID times?
Yeah, absolutely. So starting with YMYL or your money or your life, YMYL content is information that can significantly impact a person's life. So that's why it's called like your money or your life, because the way that we spend our money can significantly impact your life. If unfortunately get scammed or if you make a very big purchase on an item, or take out a loan somewhere, these are all things that significantly impact our well-being and our finances. Also, though, your life impacts, a lot of things, of course, on your health, um, the way that you choose to travel or make purchases to travel. So that kind of relates to supplements, health conditions, anything that you're really doing that can significantly harm you, but also benefit you in your direct life. That's how I think of it. There are, of course, several different niches that fall under this kind of category, and I work specifically in the healthcare realm. And when we talk about shifts that have happened since 2019, so since like kind of the COVID era, which I was working for a healthcare startup and writing about COVID content during this time, so I'm very familiar with it. And the shifts that I've seen have definitely been quite significant. And I think the number one shift that I've seen is really when it comes to the search results and like, just SERPs in general, I'm noticing that companies are more likely to rank for YMYL niches if they have very strong topical authority in their niche. So what that means is that they are seen, if they are seen actually as an expert within their specific topic that they're kind of talking about. So when we talk about healthcare, that's very broad. We can be talking about pediatric health. We could be talking about mental health, senior care, um, you know, diabetes, and then, like, kind of going into a whole, kind of condition-based care. We could also be talking about dermatology, etcetera. So, when I think of kind of topical authority, I think of how a website kind of comes across for their specific niche. So, that means if you're a dermatology company, then you really shouldn't be probably shouldn't be talking about all of the healthcare conditions like that you can be going after. You should really be honing in on what you focus on in the dermatology space, right? So that's what I've been finding lately is that my clients who have specific niches, which most of them do, they actually are quite niche in general. I'm finding that if we could develop a content strategy that is hitting all of these EEAT buckets and creating also like just very high quality content, they are much more likely to see faster but also higher quality results when it comes to ranking than topics that or companies that are kind of going after like more broad and general kind of content pieces. So that really that's the shift that I've seen in my experience working directly with websites. I think it's been a good shift because it also gives new websites, which is really what I focus on, like kind of companies that don't have an SEO strategy in place. It gives them a very strong opportunity to rank for what's relevant to them because that also matches the user search intent. And that should be our goal at the end of the day is that the eyeballs that matter, of course, like the people that need to know this information can see it. And that's what we're told that the Google algorithm does too. It's like they're trying to um give users the best search results, right? So we want to be kind of partnered in that and the SEO strategy should reflect that.
Okay. So, the other part of the question, which is like you talked about referring the sources to highlight your experience, or maybe certain sources matters in the eyes of Google. But if you use the right AI tools and right prompts, you can also supply those resources back to AI. It can do some fact checking and maybe some additional fact checking done by the writer or the experts. Do you think that kind of AI content will easily rank?
It's a little hard to tell right now, but when you look at it first glance, it does have a lot of the pieces sometimes that you would get from a writer. So, and I know that this is part of the overall trend right now in not just SEO, in technology in general, that AI is making our lives easier and even more cost effective because you may not have to pay ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or any of any tool maybe as much as you'd pay a writer to write the piece. I do think that it can help give you sort of a baseline and a first draft to outline your content and really understand what should maybe be in the article. But with my experience, not just anyone can kind of go on an AI tool and produce a really strong article. I've seen all types of pieces of content. Some that my clients like have actually shown me that they've drafted themselves, and immediately I know that this would actually probably be penalized because it's thin. It's your classic ChatGPT article with fluffy language, which is a no-go for me when it comes to healthcare content. It also has too many bullet points. Sure, it's easy to skim, but it's not easy to understand. There's not enough context. So there are these things that maybe people without an SEO background try to do to kind of cut corners. And I can't fault people for that, right? Because they're trying to leverage a channel, organic search, in a cost-effective way, in a way that they're kind of seeing on different levels on LinkedIn and maybe with colleagues or connections and kind of things like that. So it's not so straightforward, but I would say there is some, I won't say like it's useless. I think there is an opportunity here, but it needs to be leveraged responsibly and effectively if we're going to be using it for healthcare content.
Understood. So, what is your advice for a doctor, like a busy doctor, using an AI tool to maybe produce content? Uh, he is an expert, he or she is an expert in the field. They know what is right, what is wrong. Maybe they can also do the fact check. So, would it be safe for them to produce an article, give it a quick glance, and pass it on to the SEO folks?
It could hypothetically be safe. I'm sure, like, and I have seen like articles produced by these AI tools, and they are usually accurate, if the topic is not, like, super complex, if it's, like, a generalized article, in the healthcare space. But the issue is less, maybe that it's not safe, it's actually just that it's not optimized and someone wouldn't want to read it. I think that's actually the problem, more so than it not being safe if a doctor is kind of reviewing it. Um so that's what I would lean more towards, like, is that, if it's of course accurate, like, that is my number one priority, but we also want to make sure that, if someone's putting their energy and resources into reviewing and trying to get a high quality article online, then it should be worthwhile, and also if it ends up ranking, you also want it to be worthwhile for the reader when they click into it, because at the end of the day, if it's a thin piece of content and somehow it starts ranking, right, like, on, let's say the number 1, it's getting, like, the most clicks, just as an example. You even got into the AI overview or something like that, is that when the reader lands on it, they might just bounce right off the page, and that's not helpful to the business, and that's not helpful to anyone who invested in this piece because, it's not doing what it was intended to do. So I always, default to put in the extra effort to make it a valuable piece, not just because of ranking and not even just because, um, you know, you're short on time or anything like that. It's just that, you're representing your company when you create content, and that's very important.
Yeah, so see, another thing that is important for any startups or any company that is just entering in the healthcare space is that they are competing against big publications who have a reputed name, maybe very good authors, experience, fact checking, almost everything that Google needs to rank an article. How do you actually compete against, let's say, WebMD or Mayo Clinic or any other big publication if you are just a startup? Do you
Yeah.
stand a chance to rank?
Yes, I tell all of my clients, you absolutely stand a chance to rank. I've done it many, many times, and it's always first a good feeling. But second, though, is that it can absolutely happen, and I'll tell you why. And it goes right back to that topical authority niche piece. Healthline, WebMD, Mayo Clinic, they have great content processes and they have great pieces of well-researched articles on their website, but they are very broad. Especially if you take a look at Healthline, they have a lot of different pieces on some, and the pieces are generally like very good. I really do admire their editorial process. Um, but the thing that you can leverage as a founder or SEO consultant at a startup is that niche portion. And because at the end of the day, you don't need to compete against all of the topics that um, you know, these big publications are ranking against. You want to rank above them for your keywords. So if you're able to establish strong authority in this niche that you're in, then you very well have a good chance of eventually ranking above them. It will not happen overnight, but it's something that you can look to in the future. Absolutely. Like, you can have certain keyword ranking goals for year 1, year 2, maybe like up to year 5. Of course, Google algorithm changes and there's different things that happen, but generally, like, you can absolutely strive to like rank number 1 for certain keywords. And I think it's a very good and healthy thing to do because it shows that you're invested in your website. So you can come up with a list of things that you could do to improve your website, to improve your content, and um maybe there are things that you want to do down the line, like that will improve your EAT, and kind of map that out. So over time, you can also see how these different elements that you've done, maybe you implement medical review, then you implement better sources in your content, and then maybe you do some social proof, kind of can build up over time. And I think that's some of the beauty of SEO, is that it's iterative.
Understood. So let's now break down the all pieces of EEAT. We have been focused more on the experience part. There are three other elements. So if you have to break down all four of them and maybe broadly put a guideline on how to make sure that you are like safer in the safer limit when it comes to ranking.
Yeah. So we already covered experience, but we can go into expertise, which can also be reflective of medical review, because if or writers, because a writer or medical review ideally has expertise over a topic, but it also is reflective of your brand overall. If your company is like an expert in a certain space, we could kind of use law as an example here too. It's like if you're a law firm and you have lawyers writing and reviewing your content, that's expertise, right? Over legal matter. So that's the expertise portion. Authoritativeness, again, kind of it already does, like those other two things, the medical review and sources, they do cover the authoritativeness, but it's also the way that you write. Like I said before, we don't want to use fluffy language. We want to be authoritative in what we're talking about. That's very important. And it's also important for readers because they probably don't want to read a fluffy story or fluffy language when they're trying to read about something about their health. There might be exceptions here, but generally this is my guideline, and that's how I like to show authoritativeness. And then trustworthiness, again, kind of all of those things that we've talked about, but you can also add a layer of the social proof that I've mentioned. We can trust that if I use this product, it's HIPAA compliant, or they only hire a certain level of like clinicians or medical professionals on their staff. Or another one is the user experience, like I mentioned before. Can I trust this website? Does this or is it kind of like giving, a weird feel to it and I can't really trust it? And these are the things. And like for trustworthiness, um there are other things to that you can like add on. But I would say those are the things that I regularly implement. And I also encourage people to be very creative, because it also depends on like your website and your company. There are opportunities everywhere probably that you might even miss, but kind of stepping outside the box and saying, you know what, this does support this element of EAT, and I think we should show that to people.
Understood. So now the next part of this question is, what is your fact checking method or a checklist do you follow when you have to fact check a medical article, or what should be the checklist that other people follow in other industries for a YMYL content?
Yeah. One thing that I always ask is this claim verified? So can I find at least another source? If it really should be multiple sources, but like, you should be able to find this somewhere else, in my opinion. Unless of course it's like kind of a very specific and niche idea that might be unique to a certain like professional or someone with a certain level of experience. But I think generally you should be able to find a study or medical like um, journal that kind of backs up your claim. So I like to kind of find that somewhere. There are different tools that you can use to fact check like consensus, or you could do a Google search and find websites to back up your claims. And I also um value relevancy when I'm fact checking. We don't want to scare people, and we don't want to just mention things that like are somewhat relevant to the topic. Like we want it to be that every word kind of counts, right? Like we don't need to go broad when we're writing articles. Like we need to stick to the topic and say like, is this relevant? So, and that goes with fact checking, because if you have medical claims that are like irrelevant to the topic, we don't need that in there. So I look for, I would say mostly those two things when it comes to fact checking. Um, and based on the topic, other things or like protocols kind of would come to mind. But I think generally that's like really what I'm looking for.
Understood. So, what is your advice for startups who are trying to rank for medical terms in general? Just like a parting advice.
Yeah, I would say to first work with someone that you trust, to someone that you can trust your website with. Like work with someone who feels like a partner in getting really high quality content out there. And if you really truly want to rank well, the investment to me and my experience is worth it for people. So investing in these EAT elements might seem like, you know, almost like annoying or extra work now, but it really does pay off in the long run. And the most successful websites that I've worked on have always invested in those elements, and it's very easy for me to see at this point. So in the moment it might feel like that's not important or we don't need to do this, but it truly is. And even if you don't think it's important, think about your user first, and I think that will probably change your mind. And it also just takes time in general for SEO to really work and for you to see the general ROI on it. But when it's all said and done, seeing your website rank for your highly relevant and bottom funnel keywords will be very valuable for your business, especially as your competitors invest in this channel as well.
Understood. So, thank you so much, Alyssa. It was a real pleasure talking to you, and you come across as an expert in your field. So, thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for sharing so much with us. And thank you guys for listening to us so far. This was Alyssa sharing YMYL in EEAT guidelines. Make sure you subscribe to the 10x Marketer podcast before leaving. Thank you so much. Take care. And thanks once again, Alyssa.
Thank you.